Welcome to Trial by Wine. We take a closer look at crimes that highlight how fascinating humans can be. Schmidty, Swanee and Clarkey visit crimes and run them through their jury of three, debating both sides of the case to agree an appropriate, if totally fictitious, sentence. Please be advised, Trial by Wine may include explicit or disturbing content and will include drunken rambling. Listener discretion is advised. All right, how are we?
Super duper. Yes, very good.
Good to hear.
Yes, how about yourself?
Oh, I'm great. I love being on holiday. You?
Yeah. Yeah, much the same.
I'm just going to introduce ourselves before what I want to drink pops out of my hand. I'm Schmidty, no Swanee.
And I'm Clarkey. And together we are
Trial by
Wine.
And what are you drinking?
Fat bastard still.
It's
in
still
honor
on
of
that,
all
okay.
things festive. In honor of what we're going to end up being.
Oh, having had a discussion about what I should drink next, I went to the fridge to get a bottle of the Cremant and realised I haven't actually chilled one. I was mistaken.
no.
So I'm going to have to slum it.
You're not going to have a warm one.
No, I'm slumming it with a bottle of Piper Heidsieck instead.
Oh.
So we're ready?
Yeah.
Oh, Happy New Year!
Champagne!
Champagne for all! Woo-hoo-hoo. So yes, this was a nice chilled bottle that was sitting there. Someone gave me this for my birthday. Oh, I've just realised, whoever it was who gave me this for my birthday, I didn't realise. Thank you very much. It's a 2014 vintage. So thank you. I shall enjoy it on a celebratory Sunday.
The champagne is the occasion.
Cheers. Ching ching.
How excellent. It's quite different from what I just had, but it's still delicious. Okay, do you want to hear a story?
Love to, yes.
Bring it on.
As you know, as I talked about in the last episode, I have only recently returned from a trip to the UK, where Tony and I travelled from London up the east coast to Brightlingsea, Essex, and then to Diss in Norfolk, which coincidentally, I don't know if you're aware, is one of the towns that Joanna Dennehy and her accomplice Stretch robbed people when they were on the lam.
Oh, hey, is the neighbouring town to Diss called Dat?
No. Anyway, then we went up to Preston, which is quite north on the west side. And then we did a very short run over to Blackpool. And then we went a long run down to Pembrokeshire, which is in Wales. And we met up with Mick and Helen and the Sunbury Massive. The Massive! And then we travelled back down to Bath, which was really actually Bradford and Avon, which it probably wasn't in the news here, but 2 days before we went to Bradford and Avon, it completely flooded. It was a massive storm.
Oh, really?
Carla put it in the chat. What was his name? Some stupid name like Ernie or Bert. It had a stupid name. The storm was pretty annoying, but didn't affect us too much. But it did take us an extra hour to get into Bradford and Avon because you could only come up from the very top of it because south of the river was completely flooded. And then we went to Brighton, and then we went back to London. As we travelled down from Blackpool, I did see the turn off for Derby. And if you might remember, Mick Philpott from Carla's Shameless Mick episode is in Derby prison. But we didn't pull off to visit him, as it turns out. We had a great time, and I was again struck by how green and beautiful the UK is, even in November when it was snowy and drizzly at times. So it inspired me to have a look at crime from the UK. And I came across this story, which is so horrific and so shocking that you would think, a bit like your last one, that people would have heard of it. But there's almost nothing about it online. It is quite obscure, and that's kind of ironic, which will turn out. So my sources, before I forget, are wikipedia.com, yorkshire.com, dailymail.co.uk, murderpedia.com, truecrimeenthusiast.wordpress.com. So let me take you to Wath upon Dearne in Yorkshire, which is a lovely town nestled in the Dearne Valley above Sheffield. Now, I can't do a Yorkshire accent, so don't even ask. The best I can come at that is to think about the goodies when Bill Oddie used to do the whole like icky thump That's the closest I can come to a Yorkshire accent. According to Yorkshire.com, Wath-upon-Dearne is a hidden gem waiting to be discovered. Here are 10 facts about the town that I bet you never knew. Wath-upon-Dearne is a small town located in South Yorkshire, England. It's a great first fact, isn't it?
Yeah, nailed it.
Yeah. The town is known for its rich history, dating back to the Domesday Book of 1806, where it was first recorded. As in the town was first recorded.
Not the book.
Not the book. Wath-upon-Dearne was once a significant player in the coal mining industry, with several collieries were operating in the area, which will become a little bit more relevant in my story. The town is home to the Old Moor Wetland Centre, a popular nature reserve managed by the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. And Bill Oddie, being a great naturist, would have enjoyed that. I keep saying Dearne. It might be Dearne, Dearne. I'm going with Dearne.
Yeah, right.
Wath-upon-Dearne is located near the River Dearne, which offers scenic walking routes and opportunities for wildlife spotting. The town's main church, All Saints Church, is a Grade 2 listed building with parts dating back to the 12th century. Wath-upon-Dearne has a vibrant community spirit with several annual events such as the Wath Festival, a popular music and arts festival. The town is home to the Montgomery Hall, a community venue that hosts a variety of events from theatre productions to dance classes.
Do you remember the Hobart, Tasmania song that I played to you once that advertises Hobart?
No?
It's an old one, but it says things like Hobart has shopping malls and schools. And, Hobart, Tasmania, that's my wonderful town. And I feel like you should be doing these points to a tune.
I feel like Wath-upon-Dearne doesn't have much to recommend it. Sorry for residents there and the council and the Yorkshire.com who are trying to push it. But so far it's got a community building. It's got
very
church.
Average.
It's got some nice wildlife. Yeah. It's surrounded by several golf courses, including the Wath Golf Club, making it a great destination for golf enthusiasts, which, yes, golf clubs, and they do that. The town is well connected. Here's the best one. The town is well connected to other parts of the UK with easy access to major cities like Sheffield and Leeds via the nearby railway station. So, yeah, I mean, it sounds like a nice little place, right? So if nothing else, you should get a sense that the town is a picturesque and quiet place to meander around, which was not quite the case back in 1988 when the town was the scene of a gruesome spree killing.
Oh, dun, dun, dun.
Bum. Wath-upon-Dearne in 1988 was a bit different. Whilst the overall economy of the UK was strong...
A bit different from what it is now, or just
today.
A bit different from everywhere else? Okay, yeah.
I think it was a bit similar to other places in Yorkshire and South Yorkshire at the time, but it was not the same as it is today. Whilst the overall economy of the UK was strong in 1987, following Margaret Thatcher's deregulation of the stock exchange, unemployment had been high in the early 80s and the UK had been in a deep recession, reflecting in crazy interest rates of up to 18% on mortgages.
Oh.
So the lead up, what I just tried to say there, probably not very well articulated, was at this 1988 juncture, Margaret Thatcher had deregulated the stock exchange, so the economy in the UK looked good. It had come out of a really significant recession, and people talk about it now. Like we have bad financial moments, and then people say, remember the 80s when we had an 18% mortgage rate?
Mm-hmm.
So that was, where we've come from. And whilst the stock exchange was booming, places like Wath that had relied on local collieries to employ communities were hugely impacted by the decision to close non-performing and, as it turns out, some profitable coal mines. So effectively, London looked good and the overall economy looked good, but there were places that were really reliant on coal mining and the steel industry, etc., that were going through really bad times. So unemployment was incredibly high. So you've got a little bit of a dichotomy between what the government was saying was the reality about the economy and what people were experiencing. And Wath Colliery was one of those that closed, and it closed in March 1988. So around the time of the crimes I'm about to talk about. I also came across a speech delivered in Parliament in July 1988 by Peter Hardy, who was then the Labor MP for Wentworth in the House of Commons, which is pretty much this general area. In his speech, he was lamenting the extreme unemployment in the area and beseeching the government to do something about it. He talked about several collieries that had been closed, as well as a local glass plant. So, contrary to the other reports of things looking good, South Yorkshire at the time had been really hard hit. None of that is an excuse for what's about to take place, but I just wanted to give an accurate view of life at the time because I think historical context is really important. And I listen to lots of other podcasts and I listen to things, and I think there's a tendency to judge everything by today's standards, by the life we have led and our life experience. And we say, okay, well, back in 1988, everyone should have, like your story, Clarky, people should have been, oh, how's that for an irony? Yours was 1988 too, wasn't it? How weird. What a coinky-dink. Deirdre Chambers.
Shit's getting real.
As you said, mental health wasn't really, apparently he didn't have a mental health problem. He probably did, because things were very different then about how we saw the world.
Correct. Absolutely, that was.
Having said that, I'm about to talk about complete psychopath. Anthony Arkwright was born in West Riding of Yorkshire, which is now Wath-upon-Dearne, so it changed its name. He was born in 1967. Like many we talk about, Anthony did not have a great upbringing. He was one of 5 kids who were abandoned by their mother. Apparently she just booked out one day, said, I'm out of here.
At once?
Yeah, she just left. She's like,
or individually?
No, I don't think she abandoned them each one after the other. Anyway, he was raised, in inverted commas, by his father, who was a miner, which, as I've already pointed out, was the main industry in the region.
His father, who was a miner?
As in a coal miner, not underage.
Oh, I thought you meant he was underage.
Yeah, I just talked about collieries. I just talked about the mining industry. That was the point. Anyway, so his dad was a coal miner, which makes me think of Ben Stiller film. Zoolander. Makes me think of Zoolander, when he goes into the mine and he does like half an hour and he's like, I've got the black lung. Have you not seen Zoolander?
I have. I don't recall that scene, though.
He's trying to conform with his father's wishes instead of being a male model, and he goes down into the mine for about 15 minutes. He's like, I've got the black lung. It's very funny. Anyway, so his father, however, as in Anthony Arkwright's, was a miner, and the industry was in decline, so unsurprisingly, Anthony spent most of his childhood in care homes and was not academically gifted. Reportedly was pretty rubbish at school and fell into a life of crime very early on. He was known for burglary and petty crimes, as well as being a violent bully, and he ended up doing time in Borstal, which was basically juvenile detention, but it was sort of, when I think of Borstal, I think of it having a kind of military discipline to it. I don't really know anything about Borstal, but that's how I think of it. Do you know anything about Borstal?
0, less than you. I don't even have an opinion on what it could be like.
It was juvenile detention, so anyone under 17 or 18 or whatever got sent there. But I do think it focused on things like physical activity and working, and like it tried to instill, I think, discipline, like a military style. That's what I think of it anyway. There's no information regarding his relationship with his father or grandparents, but there was a rumour at the time that persisted that he was the result of an incestuous relationship between his mother and grandfather. There is no evidence. There is no evidence that is true. The rumour, however, had a profound impact on Anthony. Oh. Now, our Anthony did have some interests. He was obsessed with Jack the Ripper and Peter Sutcliffe, who is also known as the Yorkshire Ripper and was active between 1975 and 1980. And during that time, Peter Sutcliffe murdered 13 women and attempted to murder 7 others.
That's not a very good success rate.
Oh, it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
It's like 2/3. I don't know.
All things considered. So he, being Anthony, used his time in incarceration, of which there were multiple, to read up on his idols, being Jack and Peter, and decided he would emulate them one day. And one of these days, I'm going to be that guy.
Hang on a second. Is this why Wath-upon-Dearn changed its name? Or was it Wath-upon-Dearn?
No, it had changed before Anthony
Right. Because I was
decided
thinking,
to.
is he going to be the Wath-upon-Dearn Ripper? And then I thought, what if it changed its name before, like, as a result of this? That would be significant, so that no one associated it with Wath-upon-Dearn.
I'm not sure if he's even got a moniker.
Ridley.
That's right. West Ridley. Oh, West Riding.
West Riding, yeah, that's it.
West Riding of Yorkshire.
Maybe it's the Minor Ripper. Just rips you a little bit.
Just a little tear.
Yeah, barely a scratch.
Oh, don't like a little tear. I don't think he has. No, I don't think.
I mean, the Wath-upon-Dearn Ripper just sounds confusing.
No, he doesn't have a moniker.
Good, Bernadette.
When not reading about Jack the Ripper and Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, his other hobbies included building dens and hideouts, fancying himself as a survivalist. But in all fairness, compared to Bear Grylls, he really wasn't that good. He just sat around being a bit
More
weird
like
and
Albie
creepy.
Mangles.
No. Albie Mangles.
Yeah,
Who was Albie Mangles?
Aussie one.
Oh,
so in the 80s, there was Albie Mangles and there was the Leyland brothers. They all used to go out back and
probably maybe more like the
80s
Leyland brothers
versions
without
of
the
Bear
four-wheel
Grylls.
drive. I just remember the Leyland brothers with a car, like doing
Combi, yeah.
Travel all over the countryside.
It was
a Combi, yeah.
Land Rover.
No, it was a Land Cruiser or something.
It's a Landy. Surely it was a Landy.
Yeah.
Us the Leylands, travel all over the countryside. Us the
Leyland
Leyland brothers.
brothers.
Don't know if I ever watched it, but I certainly saw the trailer so that I could sing that song.
We watched heaps of it.
Unlike all the aforementioned survivalists, Anthony just sat around being a bit weird and creepy with his hunting knife, fantasizing about killing and maiming people he wasn't keen on because he was a nice guy. And I remember when I was a kid, I visited my cousin and his wife and their newborn son at the time, Wade, who's probably about 40 now anyway, in Warrnambool. And I think it was Warrnambool anyway. It was somewhere like that. My cousin Pete, who's the eldest of all the cousins, and I don't really know how old he is, but if my brother is 60, then I'm going to have to say Pete's mid-60s, maybe nearly 70. He was old in my mind because I was about 11 or 10. He didn't know what to do with me, right? So he took me golfing with him, which just basically meant I followed him around a golf course. So boring. At some point, I don't know what green we were on, but we noticed there was a guy in the bushes dressed in camouflage throwing pine cones into the what do you call it? The sand trap,
bunker.
In the bunker. Yeah, he was throwing pine cones like he was throwing grenades. And my cousin,
weirdo.
Oh, and he had total camouflage makeup and
God.
Yeah, and
really?
my cousin's like, I think we need to go now. No, we were not going to go.
I think he's right.
Oh no, he was dead right. This guy was not quite right, and so cousin Pete and I ran away as fast as we could. And when I was reading about this guy Anthony in his dens and his hideouts, I was imagining, as we know, there are some nice local golf courses around Wath-upon-Dearn. Perhaps Anthony, in his spare time, was throwing pine cones in bunkers,
of course.
being a fucking weirdo. So he also did a little bit of working at a scrapyard in Mexborough, which isn't far from Wath. But he was a shit employee, having a bad attitude, no surprise, and really poor attendance. And one day, having had enough of him, he got the sack. And that was on August 26, 1988, when he was just 21. Now, a bit like when I was made redundant from Flexi in Sydney, although my payment came a lot later, he took his cash and went to the pub because that's what I did. And that's probably where the parallels end between Anthony and I.
Yeah, because he got caught.
No, Anthony got pissed as a newt, which I didn't because I had to drive. But anyway, and at around 4:15 p.m., he headed over to his grandfather's house in Mexborough. But his grandfather wasn't there. His grandfather, who was a Lithuanian immigrant named Stasys Puidikas.
Perfect. Yes.
Well done.
Sounds like he's great.
Stasys Puidikas, I'm going to go with. On that fateful day, Stasis was working in his allotment, which is about a mile or so away from where he lived. As I said earlier, Anthony had it in his head that he was the result of an incestuous affair between his
Yes.
grandfather and his mother.
Which is why he went to his grandfather's house.
Which is why his grandfather, I think, was on his list.
Yeah.
And it was a bit of a rumour, but he'd become a bit obsessed about it. And so his granddad was top of his list, frankly. So he gets to the allotment and he went straight up to his grandfather, stabbing him in the neck so savagely that he severed his spinal cord and instantly paralysed him.
Oh.
But he didn't kill him.
Gosh. Oh.
So he then dragged his grandfather into the small garden shed on the allotment that was there, and he killed him with an axe to the head. And then he smashed his head in with a sledgehammer.
Oh, what?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. That makes me feel a bit ill, quite frankly.
Okay, well, I will warn you there's worse to come. So now he's satisfied with his work. He then locked Stasis's body in the shed and headed back to his house to steal, as in his grandfather's house, to steal any money he could find, which was around £3,000. Clearly his grandfather wasn't a fan of banks in 1988, and that was his life savings, which apparently he'd left around the house. In today's money, that would be about £8,000, which is about 16,000 Australian dollars. Unfortunately, his grandfather's housekeeper was at the house at the time. So he murdered Elsa Chronodite with an axe and left her in the kitchen.
Fucking hell, an axe. I mean, it's rough, isn't it?
It's really violent, yeah.
Oh.
And then after that, he went back to the pub. But he didn't lay low. He was described by people who saw him that night as a wild-eyed weirdo. And, quote, I can only assume he was so hyped up on booze and the adrenaline of killing people that he must have seemed completely out of it, right? He also wasn't making much of an effort to hide or avoid attention. He told the barman, and quote, it was murder on the allotment today.
Oh, see what he did?
See what I did there?
It's a double entendre.
A double entendre. Yeah, what an asshole. Anyway, so he pissed on that night till about 3 a.m. Then when he decided, then he went home, right? But then he kind of worked out who his next victim would be.
Ooh, didn't have a list already. It was a dynamic list.
Oh, I think he had like a top 5, a series of people. Anyway.
I just didn't have the priority done, so he just worked out the next one was.
It might have been a round opportunity too, a little bit. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'm
anyway,
going to kill these 5, not necessarily in this order.
Well, you're probably right, actually, because his second victim almost could have been his first. Like, if you're going to prioritise them, I probably would have gone his second victim before I went his first. Who knows how people think?
But you're not a wild-eyed weirdo, so...
Well, it can be. So on the 27th of August is when this next one happens. Unfortunately for him, Raymond Ford was Anthony's next-door neighbour. Not just because he is the second victim, but because being a neighbour to Anthony would have been
good enough
very unfortunate. Right. Yeah. So Raymond had been a teacher originally, and he was only about 45, I think, at the time that he passed. And times had gotten really hard for him. So he was no longer employed, and he spent his days drinking cheap cider and living as a bit of a hermit. So he only really left the house to go to the bottler to get some more booze. And he did the Guardian crossword, I think. Like he just had a very quiet, contained, drunk life, I think. And I'm going to say he was probably suffering from PTSD from being a teacher. Apparently
PTSD from being a teacher?
In 1988 in England,
Jesus.
Yes.
Right.
So he was also suffering from depression, and being, of course, the late 80s, as we just described in the last show, he got no sympathy or support by the sound of it. So
cheer up, mate.
It's like, yeah. It's like mental health wasn't a thing.
Are you depressed?
Oh,
cheer up.
What's wrong with you? Fucking harden the fuck up. What is it? Take a shot of concrete and harden the fuck up.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, in
concrete.
2009, before I came back to Australia, a colleague of mine once told me to do that when I was in my previous employ over there. He said, take a shot of hot concrete and harden the fuck up. I was like, okay, thanks. Cheers.
Good feedback.
Yeah. He and Anthony, being Raymond and Anthony, had run-ins in the past. Anthony, who was a absolute psycho and a bully, liked to put dog poo through Raymond's letterbox and smash his windows.
Oh.
He'd also
What?
broken
Of
into
course you
Raymond's
do.
place not long before this event that's about to take place, and he'd stolen a microwave and a clock. And apparently the clock was like a vintage clock, quite valuable. And Raymond, of course, reported it to the police, which had put him on the list for Anthony. So Anthony, having come home, pissed as a newt from the pub, strips himself naked, puts a Prince of Darkness devil mask on, goes round to Raymond's place, breaks in through the window that he'd actually smashed a few days earlier when he broke in that other time, and finds poor Raymond drunk in his house. Can you, and this is buckle up, extreme violence about to occur, can you imagine getting a bit pissed up, falling asleep, and waking
Yes.
to a naked person
Oh,
in a
no.
devil
Wearing
mask
a devil's mask.
in your house?
Gosh, you wouldn't know where to look.
For starters, right?
For starters.
Well, Anthony then proceeds to stab Raymond. He was so manic that he stabbed him between 250 and 500 times.
What? That's more than 5 times my maximum, I reckon. But maybe not quite 5, maybe 4 times. The most that I've heard in all of our
250
time doing
500
this.
is the most I've ever heard. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've heard like 37,
what?
60. Like, I've never heard
Yeah.
that number.
I was
Yeah.
thinking 60, but that's like between 4 and 10 times, or 4 and 9
It's
times
huge.
kind of thing. Like,
Huge, yeah.
oh,
He even broke the blade of his knife off doing this in his frenzy.
No.
And he had to go get another one so he could continue.
oh, my friend is not done. It's hard
Not
to get good knives
satisfied
these
with
days.
that, he then gutted the poor man, removed most of his internal organs,
Yeah.
and draped his intestines around the bungalow like bunting.
Oh, I feel sick.
I can only assume this was an homage to Jack the Ripper, as after all, he was a big fan and he wanted to emulate him and be as infamous.
Well, he's not.
The effort of eviscerating Raymond took around an hour, and when he was finished, he went home and he showered, can you imagine, the blood and gore off himself, and he went to bed.
Ugh.
I think he got home about 3
I've got visions
o'clock.
of there being bloody footprints all the way back to his house.
It's so gross, right? Oh, God. It's so gross. So he goes home and he washes off. So it was, what did I say? It was 3 o'clock or something in the morning when he got home, when he breaks in. It's 4-ish, maybe 4:30 in the morning. He goes home, cleans up, has the wash, goes to bed. So you may imagine his
night.
surprise the next morning when at 8 a.m. the police were at his door.
See, this is what I mean about the bloody footprints. Like, if they find him dead, there's going to be bloody footprints all the way back to the neighbour's house.
You
No?
would think, but no.
Oh, no, it's not that.
No. They were arresting him not for the gruesome murder of Raymond next door, but on suspicion of the burglary that Raymond had actually reported days earlier. So they take him down at least washed up. He comes to the door, he doesn't look, maybe he looked hungover or whatever, but he certainly didn't look like a man who's been out slaughtering someone the night before. Anyway, so they took him to the cop shop for a few hours and then he was released on bail pending a court date. Because at this point, let us recall your previous case where you talked about petty crimes of burglary. That's what he had been known for. And he'd been through the system multiple times. Unfortunately, no one had gone back to Raymond's house at this point, so they had no idea that he was all over his bungalow.
In pieces.
So Anthony picked up where he left off when he got out from the police, didn't he? He went to the pubs of Mexborough.
Gosh, not even hungover.
Oh, well, you know,
Like his hat.
care of the dog.
Big night.
Care of the dog.
Gosh.
Which I've got to say, never works for me. I just can't back up a hard
it's
night
totally
with a
a
second.
thing.
I can't do it. You know, it's just a step to alcoholism anyway.
Hair of the dog or a big night or both?
Well, the reason alcoholics don't have hangovers is because they just keep drinking. Hair of the dog is just that fine line. That night, which I think is now the 28th of August, he goes back home and he decides to kill another of his hapless neighbours. This time his victim was 25-year-old Marcus Law, who lived in a bungalow across from Anthony. Marcus was disabled, having been paralysed in a motorbike accident several years earlier. That's right. He decided to kill a paraplegic. Allegedly because Marcus had done a cigarette sally too often.
Oh, really?
Yeah, apparently Marcus
Gosh.
kept asking him for cigarettes.
For
Have you got
cigarettes? I've
$7
never
for
thought of that.
cigarettes for me?
For me? Never considered murder as an option for cigarette Sally.
No, but apparently
Still
if you
don't.
ask too often, it's a tipping point.
That's just how some seeds get planted and grow. That seed, murdering someone asking for cigarettes, it's not going to
No,
grow.
it's not a thing. Yep. So he breaks into poor old Marcus's house and stabbed him over 70 times, which, as we just discussed, is more what we're used to at the high end for sure. But,
I mean, that's a top end. That's
not 500 or even 250. I know.
It's absurd. Like, fucking hell. Edward Scissorhands would struggle to stab someone that many times, and he's got
Slash
like
maybe. But
five
not
on
stab.
each hand.
Oh, God, so gross.
Like, even then you get exhausted.
All right, well, are you ready to buckle up again?
Not really, but
So,
let's do it.
having stabbed him 70 odd times, he then tries to gut him, but I don't know. I'm guessing that because Marcus was in a sitting position being in a wheelchair, it was difficult for him. So he obviously cut him across his stomach, and then he shoved one of Marcus's own crutches into the stomach wound. I would like to think that Marcus is dead by this point. I'm really hoping he is.
Well, I mean, 70 times, you'd think so, but
I would hope so.
even
because
so,
then
for what?
cigarettes, because he asked for too many
To
cigarettes.
prop him up?
Well,
No, what did he put the crutch in for? To prop him up?
just to be horrendous, right? And then he gouged his eyes out, and he stuck cigarettes in his eye sockets.
Gouged his eye. What?
Oh my God.
Stuck cigarettes in his, which, if you're upset that someone is cadging too many cigarettes off you, what a waste to put cigarettes in their eye sockets, up his nose, in his earstrils, and his earstrils, in his nostrils,
Earstrils.
in his ears, and in his mouth. So
I think
I'm sorry.
earstrils should be a word. I think that's an excellent word because you know exactly what it is.
Whatever. I read ears
It's a
and I
little
read nostrils. I was like,
It's a little
reading.
hole in your ears.
I was
It's
fast reading and came out as earstrils.
It's a great word.
And I've had 3
That's what I'm going to take
champagnes.
out of this story. Earstrils. The rest of it's too traumatic to listen
It's too
to.
disgusting. That's right. But I also think that what a waste of cigarettes. If you're going to be upset about someone taking cigarettes off you or asking for them,
100%.
what are you doing? Shoving unused cigarettes in someone's eyes, nose, ears, and mouth.
If you ask for a cigarette one more time, I'm going to shove a perfectly good cigarette in your earstril.
The right or the left?
I'm not going to stab you 70 times and cut your stomach open and put a crutch in.
I'm going to
put a cigarette in your earstril.
I know you're not saying it, but
yeah,
so close to minstrel. It's got me on a whole other tangent.
Gosh.
Anywho,
the singing earstrils.
How disgusting is that?
I can't even listen. I'm desperately trying to change the subject.
I just can't even imagine being one of the police who then attended that scene after they discovered it.
Oh, wow. Gosh, how many coffees would you have to turn up to that?
No, none, because I would spew. I'd spew anyway. I'd rather spew dry reach than have a coffee in me. Anyway, next morning, Anthony runs into Marcus's mother and apparently smirks at her as he says, "Sorry about poor old Marcus. He's killed himself."
What?
Yeah.
No, he hasn't.
That's pretty much the mum's reaction. Is like, what? Again, he's not really tried to hide like he did with the barman. It's murder on the allotment. I'm just going to keep throwing these bullshit comments out there and seeing if someone picks up on it. Well, of course, Marcus's mother is like, what? So she goes straight over there and discovers her son. I just can't even, sometimes I talk about you can't unsee some things. Could you just imagine that is the vision that his mother had of him? It's just, ugh.
And the fact that the killer has said something like that that's alerted her to it.
But there's that, but there's just finding your loved one in...
Yeah, I don't want to think about that. That's why I'm talking about other things.
Right. Okay, so Anthony was strangely arrested a few hours later on suspicion of the murder of Marcus because, of course, she rang the police straight away and said,
Which bit was suspicion?
Well, she's like, he said that he'd killed himself. I went round there and he's clearly been murdered, right? So at this point, though, we have to recall that Raymond Stasis and Elsa haven't been found, the other 3 victims. So at the interview, Marcus had a pack of cards with him, so he's arrested, right? The detectives are trying to do their job. They're trying to find out what's going on, and he's not being very useful. He's shuffling through these cards, playing cards, while they're trying to question him. And then he gets to the 4 of hearts and he stops and he says, I can read the future in these cards. This is the MasterCard, not a Visa. This is the MasterCard.
So
it means you have 4 bodies and a madman on the loose. I can see Marcus Law, but the others are indescribable. They're just too horrible to describe. So clearly wanting them to see that what he'd done, like in my mind, he's just totally signposting, but not signposting. He's being difficult. He's not telling them very much, but he's just giving him a clue. So the police keep trying to get more sense out of him, ask him more questions, but he only says just bullshit and cryptic nonsense. But he did deny at this point in time killing Marcus, right? So he's talking all this shit. He's just saying nonsense. He's trying to throw him around, but he's like, I didn't kill Marcus. I didn't kill Marcus. I can see the future. I didn't kill Marcus. Didn't do nothing. So they keep him detained because, he's not quite right. And just as well, because then they found out that he had this burglary charge and the trial was pending, the court date was pending. So they go around to visit Raymond.
Oh, no. How many days later is this?
Couple of days, I think. Maybe 24 hours later. Anyway, so they get there. They see the broken window. So PC Winter goes into the flat. He saw stuff on the floor of the corridor. The Prince of Darkness devil mask was on there and some other bits and pieces. The TV and the heating were on and there was blood everywhere. Of course, the place also smelt of decomposition.
With the heating on. Ugh.
And so PC Winter goes into the bedroom and he finds what remained of Raymond Ford. It was then he realised the bits and pieces in the hall were actually the internal organs of Raymond. The police described this scene as one of the worst they'd ever come across, which isn't surprising. One of the officers was quoted saying that the murder was the most brutal act of slaughter I have ever seen. It is all the more chilling when you realise he must have spent at least half an hour inflicting these terrible wounds. So now they know that he's telling the truth about these other murders, right? Because they found number 2. So they're like, oh, when he said there were 4, there are 4.
4, there's more to find, yeah.
Yeah. They set about trying to work out who else he'd killed. They make inquiries about him. They talk to his whatever friends he's got. I don't think he's got many friends because he's a fucking asshole. But people he's worked with, relatives, whatever. And about 6 days after the initial murders, they finally find his grandfather and the housekeeper, Stasis and Elsa. Now, he confessed to killing the 3 men, but he didn't confess to killing Elsa, though he did say that he stood over her body with an axe in his hand. Of course, he was charged with all 4 murders and put in Hull prison on arraignment. Now, as I said earlier, Anthony wanted fame, and he wanted to be the 3rd Ripper, and he wanted loads of media and interest. But at this point, he got no attention from anyone. So he made up a 5th victim, and he wasted loads of police time and resources trying to find them. They searched a lake and a drainage ditch and no doubt interviewed loads of people, but in the end they realised he was full of shit. Anthony did not like that. No one was listening to him. So he decided to protest this lack of respect by doing a dirty protest, which I don't even understand what the point of this is, but he smeared shit all over his cell because he's full of shit, right? So why wouldn't you?
A dirty protest.
A dirty protest.
A load of old shit.
Literally and figuratively. He was transferred to Rampton Secure Hospital in Merseyside, and the psychiatrist there said he is the sanest man in the building because he had tried to convince everyone that he was insane. So sucks to be you, Anthony. You're fit to stand trial and to plead. So the trial started in 1989 in July, and an adjournment was sought immediately so that Anthony could change his plea from not guilty on all 3 murder charges to guilty. However, he maintained that he was not guilty of the murder of Elsa. The charge was ordered to be left on file by the presiding judge, Mr. Justice Borum. The defence argued that he was a poor young fellow with a personality disorder, and when he lost his job, it triggered him to act out. I guess the point was to get some leniency, and he was given a life sentence and required to serve at least 25 years. So 25 years before parole. At the time of the murders, remember, Anthony was 21. So he'd be out by the time he was 46.
Quite young for such violent.
Yeah, it might indicate that he's also not someone who's probably going to reform. But anyway, the Home Secretary, Jack Straw, who had a similar view to me, was having none of that. And by 1990, he increased the term to a whole life tariff, which means that he's never going to be let out.
You're never coming out.
And he is also the youngest person in the UK to have received a whole life tariff. The bitter irony for some, not me, but for Anthony, is that he wanted to be famous. The whole point of what he did was to be the next Ripper. And we had that little chat at the beginning where I'm like, he doesn't have a moniker, right? Because he wasn't famous. Never heard of him. He's not the Yorkshire Ripper. I've heard of him. He's not Jack the Ripper. I heard of him. I've heard of Rose West. I've heard of Fred West. I've heard of other killers in the UK. I've never heard of this guy. Now, no doubt the locals and the families of his victims will never forget him. But if Anthony's goal was to be known nationally or internationally, he failed dismally. I think for all his careful research about his idols, where he was, when he was hanging out in jail, he missed an important detail. If you want to be famous as a killer, Clarkie, you need to strike fear into the collective consciousness, right? The public have to be frightened of you.
Yeah. You can't be telling people about the murders once you're caught if no one knows about them.
It's old news. It's the same as the guy you just did, right? And so I didn't talk about it. Spree killing. It's all over and done with before anyone hears about it. Yeah. So if you want to be famous, if you want to get out, like be the Yorkshire, the Jack the Ripper, whatever, you got to be in the news. You got to kill another person. You got to be in the news. You got to take time over this to build enough of a fear and reputation that you get named, and then you get caught. This fucker did it in 56 hours. Killed 4 people.
Yeah, too fast.
Too fast. Committed all that carnage. And failed miserably in his goal. What a fucking loser.
Wow.
And that, my friends, is the story of Anthony Arkwright, the nobody of nowhere.
Of where?
Nowhere.
Nowhere.
Jesus, that's
how's that? What a sick prick.
It's gross.
And the funny thing is, well, when I was doing this, I had reservations about. I wrote it all up and then I thought, I don't want to have other people learn about this guy. This guy should go into nothingness, right?
Yeah, agreed.
Before we started recording, I talked about our Spotify wrap-up and I was like, well, I don't think we're in any danger of shining
we're not going to make him famous. 8 people will now know who he is.
On Spotify, that's right. Our big, that was top podcast for 8 people. So if you're one of those 8 and you know who you are, thank you very much for your continued listening to us.
If you're one of those 8, please don't tell anyone about this bloke because we don't want to increase
we don't want anyone to know about it.
Let's just keep mum's the word.
Keep it between us, okay? It's a small circle. Let's keep it between us.
That's right.
So, Clarkie, on to a sentence. Anything?
I was kind of wondering about this because it's such gross. I mean, it really did make me feel sick that some of those things you're describing, they are so extreme. I was kind of going, do we do something that is torturous to him? But I don't know that would work. I think maybe you could put him in. Because I was wondering, with the grandfather, is there something about hating grandfathers? When you were saying that could have been the motivation behind it, I thought maybe he's going to go and kill a whole lot of elderly people, and maybe we could put him in a cage in an old person's home so that he was tormented. But it wasn't that either. I think he's literally killing people he knows, not people he hates. And
it's someone who feels that's done him wrong at some point.
Well, but I feel like everyone that he knows will have done him wrong at some point because he's a freaking whack job. If you look at him the wrong way, that's enough. To go and kill the poor disabled bloke who asked him for cigarettes, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
That's not normal. I don't know. It's hard to find a motivation. It's hard to understand other than I think your commentary of him wanting infamy. He's already got a lot of I'm sorry, who? What did you do?
Yeah.
No, I never heard of it, mate.
Yeah.
But I think he needs a lot of that, just hopefully he's just in a cell by himself, can't tell anyone about what he did. No one's going to say to him, "What are you in here for?" No one's ever going to look at him. I just think he just needs to fade off into oblivion. And I know that that's not a punishment
because
as such, but
it's almost like that has happened to him in some ways because he's no one's ever heard of him. 30 years on.
Correct.
Who? More than that, 40 years on.
Yeah.
So I feel like that is good, but I'll add to that. I agree with that, but I will add, I just tried to look at what the best medieval punishments in Lithuania were, and I can't really find anything, but it does look like draw and quartering, the standard.
Yeah.
Beheading, burning. But I think I'm going to go for impalement. But I'll go for impalement on a crutch.
Oh, yeah, good call.
Yeah.
Whilst fading into obscurity, you get impaled on a crutch because it just seems appropriate.
And maybe between 250 and 500 wasp stings or bee stings.
Oh, that's a good one. I got stung by a spicy fly yesterday.
With a dose of anaphylaxis.
Well, thankfully, I don't have an allergic reaction.
No, but he could have an unhealthy dose of it.
Yeah, I was watering the garden in the back and I got stung by a bee. And I was like, for fuck's sake. At least it's happened before now, so it only lasts for about 10 minutes, the pain.
I always feel sorry for the bee with that.
I did too.
Wasps are just
It was a bee and I thought, you poor darling, it's not your fault. And I don't know. I felt sorry for it too. And I thought, why weren't you in a hive? It's dusk. Why haven't you gone home? Poor little thing.
Honey, why are you not home?
Oh, no. Very sad. Yeah, I think impalement, disappearing into nothingness.
Yeah, with a healthy dose of anaphylaxis.
Yeah.
And wasps.
And wasps, yeah. Let's do that.
European wasps, to be Pacific.
Well, his grandfather was from Lithuania and he was in the UK.
Lithuanian European wasps.
You can have him, yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining me on that.
Well done.
Revolting
Thanks for making me sick today. That was really nice.
Yeah, sorry. And as we say every week, miss you already. Ciao.
Ciao.
Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine, or visit our website www.trialbywine.com to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from pixabay.com.